Hello, friends. This is RY. Hey, every once in a while, somebody from the community steps out and says, hey, how can I help you? And I just want to give it a shout out today to somebody who's jumped in and said, hey, look, I do audio editing and production, and I would love to help you. So big shout out today to Dadbod, who jumped in and said, how can I help with this podcast? Thank you so much for doing the edit and the mixing. I cannot tell you how helpful that is. If you have something that you'd like to contribute to the podcast, if it's something you really enjoy listening to and want to just help out, our transcribers have done it. Folks have helped spread the word on social media. Folks have given it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Google Play. Anything you can do to help out is much, much appreciated this week. Big thanks to Dadbod. All right, let's jump into the podcast. All right, here we go. Ready?
Welcome to Love in Brief, a brief ABDL podcast focused on issues of love.
Love.
I love love. Love for yourself.
Self. Sorry,
Others.
I just meant to say love again. Others. Love.
Oh, we are on it. I can feel
love
it.
For your community. Yeah.
Love for your friends. And
love them.
Love for the new and potentially super exciting and fun situations that you can get into and set up for yourself, which is exactly what we're talking about today.
Heck yeah. Yeah, we're going to talk about play. We're going to talk about interpersonal play specifically. There's lots of forms of play. Heck, we've done a couple of episodes on Play for One, which we both think is just fabulous. But this one is fabulous. Play between 2 or more people. And specifically, we're going to talk about how to communicate to have better play together.
Right. So essentially the work that goes in to make the play.
Yeah. And I think, of course, there's some folks who are listening who are like, whoa, I've never even met anybody. I can't imagine actually playing, all the way through to folks who are like, I play all the time. I bet there is something for everybody in this discussion. And if you want to have better play, you can learn all kinds of cool rope techniques or spanking techniques or just the right diapering technique. That's all great. But there's also all the stuff that happens before you ever even start playing. And there's the stuff that happens in between playthings and scenes. And then there's the stuff that happens afterward. And we're going to focus on that stuff today that makes the play so much better.
Right. So we're not doing calisthenics. We're not doing foot drills. We're not talking about being the best player you can be. We are just talking about being the best teammate you can be.
Heck yeah. Game. I love that analogy. That's perfect. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
And we get to welcome back to Love and Brief a good friend of ours and I think a really wise person. Duffman, welcome back to Love and Brief.
Hey, thank you all for having me.
Absolutely. This is one that we've kind of kept in our back pockets for a while because I know you and I got into a conversation months ago and you had all these really wise sort of tips and tricks for better play and how to communicate for better play. And I was like, oh, we got to do that episode. And this week we're doing that episode. But before we do, we always start with a question. Tell us about your love right now.
Well, at the moment, I love you guys for having me back on.
Thank you.
Pleasure speaking to you guys again.
We love you too.
Also, just having love for community and all, meeting new friends and all the wonderful experiences that come along with it, along with the ability to go and travel and meet new people. So my love's pretty broad, to be quite honest, but it's there.
Yeah, and I know you've got travel coming up, which means you may even have some play coming up. And
that's the hope.
That's the hope, if all goes well. Yeah, I know you and your partner are going to travel, and then you've got some exciting adventures. I get to hopefully travel to see you here in a little bit. So you've got lots of adventures in your near future. I wonder if we could start with, if you have sort of an overarching paradigm, I suppose, when you're getting ready to play, and maybe I'll even define play a little bit. Play can take a lot of forms, right? Sometimes it's scenes. Sometimes it's somebody that you're in a relationship with. Sometimes it's somebody brand new. I guess there's lots of forms of play, huh?
Yeah, there's a lot. So I mean, from my experiences, and I've had a lot of different experience with, vanillas and also people inside the scene and out, and some people exploring. So what I found that's most effective is just kind of defining the rules on how to have the conversation per se. So how to, initially say, hey, here is a need of mine. Here's how I'm going to communicate that need of mine to you. And here's how I want your involvement. And here's how I want you to communicate back to me. Now, I think that that's all just really, really important. And actually, I got a lot of the feedback from opening up to vanilla partners about some of my kink interests. Some of them went good, some of them went bad, pretty much as predicted. But you kind of learn from each one. So I started developing kind of a body language type thing and some different tricks not necessarily tricks, just forms of communication that go and help have the conversation and make it seem less awkward and just kind of more productive, if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. And I know R&T and I have talked about this on previous episodes, but like when you describe having a conversation beforehand, sharing needs, I do feel kind of awkward, right? Like it can feel a little bit weird to talk about fun, sexy ABDL things or spanking and say, here's what I need. So I'm down for some tips and tricks, man. And would love to start sort of at even before you're together level, maybe even just if you're planning to meet somebody. Does it start even then? Like when you're like, hey, we should meet up sometime and maybe play?
Well, it kind of a double-edged sword, right? So usually if you're going into meeting people, you already know the elephant in the room. You have shared interests and you're going and you need to go and navigate that conversation. So that's kind of one element to it. But one thing that I wanted to mention that was very important was going and expressing your needs to a partner that may kind of be unaware of what your needs are and what your interests are and how to express them in certain ways. So one thing that I kind of did unintentionally, but kind of observed myself, was when I quit smoking. So when I quit smoking, one of the tips that I used was I was constantly looking for a way to keep my hands busy. So I would keep a water bottle in my hand and go and, mimic the motion of, taking the top off or spinning the top off, putting my hands down, putting it up to my mouth, drinking and putting it down. So it was kind of a very familiar motion because you kind of come across very apprehensive when you're, looking for a cigarette or where you're needing a cigarette. So people they feed off of that body language and you can kind of come across as nervous or, certain ways. What your conversation is going to portray isn't quite going to mean what you want it to mean. And it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. So I felt that when I was going and expressing kink interest, it was kind of a similar thing where I was saying, hey, I'm interested in this and I want to bring you into this lifestyle of mine, is they would look at me and go, okay, well, this is kind of awkward. So it's kind of getting rid of the awkwardness by what I used as kind of a kitchen technique. So I would try and use like cooking, like say, hey, we're going to go and do a joint activity together where, both of our hands are busy. We're focused on a common task, whether it's cutting onions, tenderizing meat, anything like that, and then having the conversation that way. So you're not sitting there directly on a couch right in front of each other, looking awkwardly into each other's eyes saying, hey, I want to put you in diapers type thing.
Yeah, especially if it's your first time having that conversation. The kitchen technique is brilliant.
Yeah, having something to do with your hands.
Yeah, so I just found that it just progressed things a little bit easier because everybody wants to focus on, kind of the topic at hand, but it allows breathing room. So you're not like right up in each other's space saying, hey, here's something brand new that I want you to go and be involved in. But also to even bring it up, you're also doing something together to start with. So it's initiating the conversation together and also doing a task together.
I like that detail that you're already doing something jointly. So it kind of lends itself to furthering the conversation in a together way.
Yeah, it's already sort of cooperative and moving toward a shared goal. Now that you're saying this, I bet this applies outside of kink as well. I was just thinking, like, I used to have a mentor in high school and early college, not in the kink world, just in life, who every time I would go over to his house, the first thing he'd do is be like, come here and help me with something. And we would start doing whatever little DIY thing it was we were doing. And like, then he would dive into the deep stuff of life that would have been really awkward for us to be sitting across from each other in chairs.
Well, absolutely. So I think it can apply in, any walks of life, because one thing that we have now that wasn't quite there when I first entered the community was, a lot of the online stuff. So people can interact in one way online, and then when you meet them in person, it's kind of completely different. So if you have like an online relationship with somebody where you're starting to establish, either an online or play dynamic, and you're starting to get in depth of that, and then you go and initiate a meetup, it's good to go and do something together so that it takes away some of the awkwardness, because the person that you met online may not always be the person that you meet in person.
Sure. And we communicate really differently, right? In these two different forums.
Exactly. And, the thing is going and meeting somebody firsthand, or meeting your first person, can be an absolute terrifying experience for a lot of people. I know from my own first example is it took me 3 times to work up the courage to go to my first munch when I was younger. But
did you do the thing where you drive halfway there and then turn around and come back?
I stayed in the parking lot for a little bit, and I was kind of looking at people going in, and I was like going, oh, okay, this is terrifying. Somebody's going to recognize me here, and I left. Kind of did that a couple different times, and then finally just went up and said, you know what do I got to lose? And just sat at the table. And, that's how you finally just get your foot in the door. So that's overcoming personal fears.
Yeah. Do you remember if there were, maybe at that one, maybe at other munches, but if there were activities that you would even recommend and say, hey, here's this thing, so you're not just sitting across a table from each other? Because the thing that I default to is, let's get drinks. But then the thing I'm doing is drinking, which is a bad combo for negotiating, potential play. So I wonder, are there other activities that sort of lend themselves to this?
Yeah, some of the most successful munches that I've been to, I've been to some bad ones, some subpar ones, and I've also been to some very successful ones. Most of them are activity-based, where, for example, you're meeting at a John's Incredible Pizza where there's games there, and you can go play skee ball and whatnot. Same thing with like a Dave & Buster's is, people can kind of come and go and be tasked as they want, so they're not stuck at a table. Also making sure that there's food there, anything that goes and provides an area of comfort. But, even with munches per se, is going into it and having the kink element immediately in your face is usually terrifying for a lot of people. So it's finding a way to make things kind of comforting for all, to where if somebody is feeling overwhelmed or is, having trouble interacting socially with people, it's not kink focused. It's more getting to know people focused.
Yeah, and we've talked about munches before. I know I derailed us into munches, but that shared experience piece I think really carries into munches. For the one-on-one conversations, I'll even back up before that first meetup. Have you ever tried to start communicating for better play when you're interacting online, even before you've met? Are there steps to be taken there that can help even for that first time that you want to meet up? So basically, it's kind of how things are. It's kind of an act and react type thing. So you kind of, you don't jump into the deep end of the pool and wait for the biggest splash to go and, figure out what's going on. Because people can be really inappropriate with going, hey, nice to meet you. Here's my wet diaper. So a lot of people can be very inappropriate, but it's more of a, getting to know them a little bit more. That's establishing, hey, a good give and take relationship when it comes to conversation. Then you can start initiating, maybe some playful names or playful banter and seeing if they're receptive to it, and then expanding off of that. So pretty much everything is just feeding off of the other person and developing an organic relationship with them.
Can you give us an example of what maybe is a technique that either you or someone has tried that was well-meaning, but it just did not translate into creating good communication? And on the other side, what is the situation that you've heard about or experienced that has been like super successful, and it's actually been something that you've taken in and used now?
For an online basis or just in general?
In general, it could be online. It could be at a munch suggesting play, or just in any kind of play-based situation where you're having the discussion beforehand.
Okay. Well, I mean, I can kind of dive into like once you've initiated play. Usually, to get any one-on-one play, usually you have an established relationship with them beforehand. You have some common interests. So, I mean, for me, like successful methods that I've found, just within myself and with other people is usually, ignoring the elephant in the room, right? Is going, this may be the least interesting thing about this person. Yes, we share this common interest, but let me kind of peel back the layers of you and valuing the dynamic that we're going to build with each other and whether or not there even is one. So I think that people have a higher success rate when they focus on, the value of the person and what they can bring to a relationship with you, that is going to create a better dynamic. And so they're going to have more success when they're not focused on just initiating play, because play can be pretty black and white, when it comes to going negotiating certain things. But the higher success rate is going to be, hey, I value as a person, and establishing a trust and that they are actually valued as a person before initiating the play conversation.
I love that. And here's why. What you said about sometimes play can be pretty black and white or straightforward. I know that one of the things people have sought you out and you've sought them out for when it comes to play is things like impact play, right? And it's tempting to think that's just about somebody walking up and going, hey, will you spank me later? Or will you flog me later? Or whatever. What you're describing is saying something like, I mean, maybe, but can I get to understand who you are and what you like beyond just, I'm not just a spanking machine or a flogging machine. Let me understand more about who you are. You can understand a little bit about who I am, and then bring that to our play. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the people that I've played with, especially the ones that I have a really good relationship with, that'll, ask for impact or spanking play or, anything along that lines are usually people I know outside of that just kink element. There'll be times where somebody comes up that I'm, familiar with, but don't really know that well. And they say, hey, can we do this? Or would you be willing to do this? And then we just need to have the conversation first. So me, I'm going to always go and seek out, having additional conversation before I go and work with new partners, just because it's not just, for our own benefit of having a great scene, but it's also safety. So we'll want to know if there's any, underlying conditions, anything that I need to know before initiating in something that could be very, physically and emotionally damaging for a party. So I think that it's just, being conscious of what you're working with before you go and initiate that.
So if you did know someone in the kink community who you also spoke with outside of it, like you're speaking about now, people who you'd feel comfortable jumping into a scene with, how would you suggest going about initiating that first scene with someone new?
Usually it comes to, if they'll come to me. So I always go into events with, no expectations. I'm not going to go in there saying I'm going to spank X amount of butts like at this event, and then I consider it a success. I always go in with,
that's a wild thought.
Yeah.
I can just see like tallying. Yeah. I can see why that's a bad approach.
It is. And so when you go in with an expectation of going, hey, I'm going to put myself out there. I'm open to sharing my space with people. And if they trust me, and we develop a good, speaking rapport and relationship together that will initiate a scene, then we can go and discuss that. But I always leave myself pretty available when it comes to having those discussions. So usually, people can be kind of nervous when they're coming up to somebody, and I've heard that I can be kind of defensive looking and not easy to approach. So I figure that if they are coming to me and asking me for a thought about, hey, what do you think about this, or what do you think about this, or how would I do this, then eventually I'm going to go and ask. I said, well, if you like, we can discuss having a scene together, or we can work with this. I want to know what your thoughts are with this. What are your basics? What are your experience? And just start and asking questions. And usually that'll feed into whether or not a scene is going to develop or not.
What do you think are the most important questions that you need to ask before okaying a scene with someone?
Probably one of the most important is, are you drunk? Or are you on any drugs?
Good point.
So, I mean, that's the big thing with me is, I've been in multiple events where, people have said, hey, can we discuss having a scene with you later and do some impact stuff? And I said, well, you need to come and we need to discuss this before, X time, because I'm going to have a whiskey at this time. And anything past that, it's going to be a no-go at the station to go and initiate that type of play. So, the most important thing is seeing if they're just having the beer bravery or the drug bravery to go and initiate the scene, or if it's something they really want.
Once you get past that, and this may be the most awkward ask in the history of my podcast, but can you kind of dialogue with me a little bit as if you were trying to figure out what I wanted from a scene? So we've sort of established that I'm in a good space to make decisions. I really genuinely want to have this discussion. What do you ask me next?
I'd probably ask you what your experience are, what levels of aftercare you need afterwards. And so just kind of how to care for things going forward. What are your goals in the scene? How much experience do you have? Do you understand the levels and that you control the scene? Because especially if I'm topping from, an impact standpoint, is I give the bottom complete control over the scene, and I let them know and reassure them that they can say and they have the power to red a scene anytime they want. And it's not on me. It's not on anybody else. It's completely on that person. So if they feel uncomfortable at any point in time, they control the power. I'm just a participant and I'm just a facilitator of it.
That is such I think a great reframing of sometimes what I have seen. And of course, we're speaking in sort of BDSM terms, but it applies to any type of scene, right? It could just be a caretaking scene. It's anything where you are in a vulnerable position with another person or having a sexual experience. But this reframing of, hey, I want you to know that you're in charge of this. That's really helpful, especially coming from, as you describe it, sort of you're in this dominant perspective. I think sometimes there is pressure for the person in the dominant side, or the dominant role, I should say, to just know what to do. You should just know what to do. Or the sub to think, on the flip side of the same coin, I guess I shouldn't ask for things, right? Like, because I'm supposed to be submissive.
Well, yeah, and I understand how that perception can be. But when it comes to BDSM, and just any sort of dynamic, a lot of it's just about power exchange. Is you are giving control to another person, right? But you need that person that you're playing with needs to earn that control first. And so establishing, that, hey, we are going into the scene with you in control. I am the facilitator. And if you decide to shift into, now you have complete thing over me and complete authority over me, then that's just a trust, that's being amplified, right? So you are then, furthering your relationship with that other person to where they trust that their safety is in your hands and you're going to do the best for them to have the best possible scene. While at the same point, they need to trust that they can break that scene and know that, breaking a scene is not, the be all end all worst thing you're going to end up, dragged through everywhere unless you're being blatantly unsafe. But, stopping a scene is not always a bad thing. Sometimes you just need to take a step back and reassess. And I never think that having open communication or keeping those routes of open communication with somebody I'm playing with is a bad thing. I mean, it should always be open no matter what.
Amen. I mean, I have stopped scenes. I have had scenes stop that I was leading. And it is never a situation, like you said, unless somebody's just being wildly irresponsible, it's never a situation where you're saying, hey, I'm judging you, you're out, or you did a bad job. You're saying, I'm communicating a need right now, or I'm listening to you communicate a need right now. And that is the foundation of really great play.
No, absolutely. And it can translate with, any sort of play, right? So, communicating needs and finding ways to go and make sure that your needs are being met. For example, so we've talked a lot about, impact and spanking type things, so the physical elements, but let's talk about, what everybody else wants to talk about is the age play element, right? So one thing that, right, so it's about time. So always what we kind of get to, and something that, is kind of an irky thing for me, just as a top and a daddy and a caregiver, is when people are quote unquote bratty. Right. And so for me, that word, to be quite honest, it feels like it's dismissing somebody's needs. You can go and dismiss somebody as, oh, they're just being bratty, or, oh, they're just a brat. And, oh, that's, just their way of being a brat. I don't really see it that way. And I believe that, the viewpoint of, just calling somebody a brat, I mean, whether they identify as one or not, I just think that it's beneficial to go and identify what the need is that's being asked for at that time. So if somebody is, acting out or being bratty or having, that behavior expressed, from my perspective, is they're not being bratty. They're expressing that they have a need that they want you to meet.
Oh, that's interesting. So even if the behavior is, so-called bratty behavior, they may be communicating a want or a need. It just may not be the thing that they're ostensibly doing. They
may not be able to express it in a certain way, because especially if you're going and in the middle of a scene or in a dynamic with somebody where you have a big little dynamic with them, there's times where they're not going to break their headspace to go and say, hey, I want this. They're not going to speak to you as adult versus adult or adult to adult. They're going to speak kind of in whatever mindset that they fall into. So if their little age is pretty young, they're not going to articulate in paragraph form that they want cuddles or they need a diaper change or they need to be fed. Like, they are going to act in a certain way.
That raises an interesting question for me, which is because you're describing essentially during the interaction, right? During the scene, they're in little space. Do you have conversations beforehand that when they are in adult space, and intentionally have conversations in adult space about what that little space experience is going to be like, so that you don't have to rehab them or guess or surprise yourself when in little space?
Right. And that's one of the key elements is, once you're in the headspace, is to try and navigate it the best you can to where you're not breaking it. So, before, especially with, a new partner, or establishing a new dynamic with somebody, is I go back to my kitchen method, right? Where I go and flat out put the rules out to say, hey, the kitchen is our neutral zone. If we need a break at any point in time, we can come here, we can have adult conversation. We can reassess scenes. We can gauge where we're at. If we need to have conversations, we can go and navigate to the kitchen. We can, sit there at the bar or have a drink, or I can give you juice or anything like that, and we can reassess. That goes both ways too, not just from the bottom, but also from the top, in case somebody needs a break. So for example, navigating, a little into going and, to where a kitchen would be needed, or that, safe place to go and have these discussions would be needed, is just checking up on how things are going throughout the scenes. So for example, as an adult or a caregiver, you don't need to say, hey, do you want to go have the kitchen or go to the kitchen, have a talk? But you can talk to them and be like, hey, do you need some juice? Do you want to come to the kitchen? And you can kind of indicate, hey, here's the intent. Here's what I'm presenting to you. As if you need a break, you can say yes. If you don't, you can say, hey, things are fine the way they are, and I'm fine where I'm at. So we always establish these areas where this is adult speak, and then everything outside of that is how you navigate the scene and the dynamic in that element.
How fun is that to have a geographical boundary? It's a really clever, it's just a reflection of headspace in a physical space.
Yeah, and it's a very caring way to not be super jarring about headspace. Because I know personally, whenever I'm in that headspace, it can be super jarring if somebody's like, wait, pause. Which is essentially what you're doing, but in a way that's super caring and considerate of both parties, I think, which is really nice.
100%. And just to kind of add on to that is, it mentioned it goes both ways, right? So there's certain ways to go and, ask for the need for space or need for reassessing, to where, you're opening up that maybe this is needed, or this is my way of checking in on somebody, where you say, okay, kiddo, do you need an adult to go and do this? Or, okay, are you happy there in your crib? Do you want me to get you anything? I'm going to go to the kitchen. And you can kind of go and ask these things and still be the caregiver, but you're giving them the opportunity to go and respond in what is most comfortable for them. Now, the same thing goes for a top, because there's at times where a top can be very, very taxing. And sometimes you just need a break. So you can say, okay, kiddo, hey, I'm going to go and fix some juice. Would you come join me in the kitchen and this and this? So you can kind of navigate that way without going, hey, hard stop. Because, kind of what we hear, right, is a lot of feedback from how dynamics are going and how play scenes are going is, one, when a little has to top from the bottom, apparently that's awful. When the little is trying to direct the top on what to do, that's kind of a headspace breaker. And also the other one is when a top goes, okay, well, hey, pizza's coming in 5 minutes, get up. It's that hard stop.
Yeah. Well, and you've described different ways of topping from the bottom. As you said, you can top from the bottom by having control of the scene in ways that you've previously discussed that don't break the scene, right? You can still top from the bottom, and you can share needs in ways that you have already become familiar with, giving each other those signs and signals and using language or even physical spaces, as you've described it, to communicate things you've already talked about or you've already rooted yourselves in. And certainly as you get to know somebody more, I'm sure that becomes easier. I love the intentional practice of saying, hey, would be great not to have to break scene or break headspace. Here's some ways we can communicate with each other.
No, absolutely. And that's where you establish that kind of beforehand. Where, same thing when it goes to impact, when I'm negotiating a scene with anybody else, is I say, okay, this is new for us. This is something that we're exploring together. Here is how I'm going to facilitate this scene for you. You are in control. I need your feedback to make this great for both of us. So I'm going to check in on you these ways. Here's the ways I'm going to communicate with you. Here's this. Here is this space if you need to, reset, or we need to reevaluate things. I'm giving them every opportunity that they can have to know that they are still kind of in control until they're ready to completely give that control.
I'm curious, not to take us back too many steps, but we've spoken about how to keep scenes that are agreed to working. I'm curious, if someone approaches you and you're actually not feeling comfortable or even just up to a scene with someone new or someone you already know, what is a way to say no that doesn't atrophy that relationship or that trust or that mood? Do you have any tips on saying no thanks to this that are, I don't know, relationship building rather than deteriorating?
No, absolutely. And communication goes both ways, right? So, just as freely as somebody, can go and ask and negotiate from their side, is I need to be able to feel safe to say no. So if, there's a situation like, for example, like if somebody comes up to me and wants a scene and I had a couple cocktails, I don't feel comfortable facilitating certain scenes with that. So I just explain to them, hey, we can definitely have this conversation, but at a later point. Right now, here's the deal. So I don't want to leave things ambiguous, because if I just say, yeah, no, I'm not feeling it, that's dismissing what their ask is. And it probably took a lot of, courage on their part, or a lot of, whatever it took to go and ask. I don't want to dismiss them, but I also don't want to leave things open for interpretation to where they could see fault in asking for it. So I'm going to be direct. So I'm going to say, hey, I didn't get a lot of sleep, or, hey, I've been having a lot of scenes and I'm trying to enjoy my space right now. I'm trying to, unwind. And if the person values me as somebody they can have a scene with, then they'll understand that. If they don't value me and they're only using me for a scene, then, it probably wasn't worth exploring in the first place.
That's a great way to put that, because I remember I had this experience with you when I had somebody that I brought to you, I don't know, a couple of CapCons ago, and I said, hey, I have this idea, let's do this thing, and you were so great because you went, wow, that sounds awesome. I'm exhausted. I've been doing this for an hour and a half or whatever. Tonight's not the night. And the way you did it was so clear that it wasn't, you were like, hooray for asking. And also to me and this person, I can't do it right now. And it was like, the only message to me is, hey, communication's good. Thanks for doing it. Let's take a run at it tomorrow.
Yeah, communication is never a bad thing. And so especially with just asking for kinks, I mean, it can be so jarring just going and asking for certain needs to be met. And so, I mean, especially, even with close friends, is I'll play with, close friends and whatnot. And, we have our friendship outside and we have our relationship outside. But, if they ask for a certain scene or a certain thing to happen for a kink scene, they could be scared that I could view them differently outside of it. So just going and asking, I value those people. I value playing with those people. I value our relationships together. So I think it's just so important just to not leave things open for interpretation. So I would never dismiss an ask unless it's just, I would put things in a way that is not going to come across as dismissive, but it's also going to be very, very clear on why it can't happen at that moment.
I will say, in R&T, maybe you can sympathize a little bit here. That is different than somebody who has never met you and doesn't have a relationship with you walking up and asking for a diaper change or to, play with you in a way that feels really inappropriate. Those you can just reject and say that is such an inappropriate way to ask. Because I know R&T and I've certainly had folks come up and kind of break every social rule at once. And it's okay to politely talk about, play or whatever. But completely agree. People who have bothered to establish some sort of connection and then politely engage in communication, they deserve for that to be honored. People who just come up and are like, change my poopy diaper. No, you're just going to get rejected, like in a not nice way.
Can confirm. I would go so far as to say this is not an arena where subtlety is a good thing. So I think very early on, when RY, you and I were dating, somebody kind of sort of added themselves onto to our sort of our dynamic, just in general, by saying, "Oh no, like, do we have to go take a nap? Should we eat a snack?" And I'm like, oh, hold on a second. Like, you have to actually have a really, really clear, as Deathman was saying, conversation. You can't just kind of leave nothing to interpretation or subtlety. Like, you have
just
to be very
insert
clear.
yourself in.
That was. I mean, I feel like that was jarring for all parties involved. Maybe not for that person, but for the other two parties.
Yeah.
So I would say clarity is important for sure.
Yeah, and I appreciate you brought that one up too, in so much as it illustrates, Duffman, as you pointed out, sure, when we think of scening, we often think of BDSM, I think. I think we think of spanking and impact play and all kinds of fun, torturous delights. But this applies to dynamic. I mean, scening happens in lots of ways. And in the age play and ABDL world, sometimes scening is just kind of being mommied or daddied or caregivered and this person wasn't asking to be flogged. They were inserting themselves into our dynamic without consent. And while it's not a physical violation of consent, it was certainly like, whoa, what are you doing here? So I don't want to go too far down that path, but just suffice it to say, of course, we always try and communicate clearly, and we always try and say, hey, thank you, I want to honor your communication. Unless it's just, come on, what are you doing? And I think probably everybody listening knows the difference. I also want to note that we talked about communicating for better play. What is the benefit of all of this freaking communication? It seems like an awful lot of work. It may even seem slightly unsexy when you're having your pre-conversation or even your negotiation, as some people say. What's the benefit, Duffman?
Well, why not? I mean, if the thing is the plain and simple truth is, I mean, this is a factory install for so many of us. is where this is what makes us happy. This is our place. These are our sexual interests. This is, a wide variety of things. If this is what you truly want, why would you not feel comfortable expressing them in a direct way? And direct not being like, hey, go up and change my poopy diaper, blah, 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 blah type stuff, or like what you've experienced. But clear communication only makes it better for all parties that are involved, to where you can go and you can expand on certain things and you can get your needs met, whether as a top or a bottom or anything. This could be a deep rooted desire that you've been thinking about your entire life. And if you're in that element with somebody that you trust and you value, and you can put, your faith in that they're going to successfully navigate a scene with you, why would you not want to go and express your needs to them and give them the opportunity to go and meet that?
That's well said.
Absolutely. The benefit is actual rewarding play where you get your needs met because you both have discussed what those needs are.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like to use an analogy, if I were planning like a raging party, I was planning a huge weekend party, I would never go in with the plan of either I'm just going to plan it when we start the party. What's planning? Don't bother. Nor would I say, here's what I'm going to do is I'm only going to plan when I'm super already drunk and partying, because that's when it feels most natural. I would step outside the future experience I want to have and make really great plans to have the best fucking weekend of my life. And I would do those things in a context that was deliberate and sober and choiceful so that I could have the future experience I really, really want to have. And then when the party comes, I can have the time of my life. But to see those things as disparate, I think, is one of the tendencies that leads us to not communicate. It's like, talking about sex is unsexy. I don't think it is. I think that's how you set yourself up for the best sexual encounter or the best play encounter or dynamic encounter of your life.
No, I completely agree with you. And one thing that, we touched on a little bit earlier is, that I wanted to kind of circle back to a little bit, because you brought up, alcohol and drug being involved and being approached with somebody who may be, not quite in the right frame of mind to have a scene with. I don't believe in dismissing that either. So if they come up to you and say, hey, and they're really, really drunk and they get their beer courage and they come up and say, hey, you know what, can you go and do this? Can you go and do this? I'm thinking in the back of my mind, it's not going to happen right now. I'm going to wait until you're sober, but I'm still going to reconnect with you and circle back because you're expressing a desire. So if I'm going to go and reconnect with that person, be like, hey, just wanted to touch base with you. You'd mentioned something to me last night, and I wanted to see if this is something that you still wanted to explore. Now that we're sober and we could probably facilitate it, or whether or not you want to discuss that. So I still do that, but it's also just mainly about just safety. Really, you can't consent to a scene. If you're really on a lot of drugs and a lot of very, very drunk. So I think it's kind of a disservice to, get into a lot of scene type things when you're not in the right frame of mind. And you can also run into very unsafe situations with people that will go and willingly facilitate that for you without questioning your right frame of mind.
No, for sure. Yeah. And we talked about consent. Consent is not antithetical to sexy fun times. It is essential for sexy fun times. We talked about communication beforehand. We talked about planning and saying, what do we both want out of this experience? And of course, again, much like a party or writing a song together, or I presume dancing, I don't know how to dance, but I assume that having that pre-planning is a given in every other sort of cooperative building experience. It's just something about sexual encounters, kink encounters, that people feel weird about it. I think it's not only not antithetical, I think it's essential for really, really great play. Communicate, plan, structure, decide. It's not that you can't have freewheeling fun, but if you're going to do a scene and try new stuff together, why not talk about what you want and what you don't want?
It is. And also, for example, because we keep going to the party analogy, is just because you're attending a party does not mean it's open consent for everybody there. That's one misconception that I see quite often, is that, people would be like, hey, I'm hanging out with kink friends. This means that, my space is their space and we're all on the same page about the expectation that play is going to be kind of implied. And I think that may be an incorrect approach to it. So I always try and brief everybody and say that, consent is something that's earned.
That's a good call out. I'm so glad you called that out. Consent is not a given. It never, ever should be.
I think bottom line, consent is the baseline. Communication beforehand is super helpful. Planning and during the scenes to have better play. It sounds like the trick is you can absolutely just talk out loud, but you can also find really cool ways to say things to your partner that can help guide that scene both as a top and a bottom. It's just helpful if beforehand you understand what those ways are. If you're going to go waving semaphore at each other, you should probably decide, what it means. So, Duff, man, this has been fantastic. Anything else that you want to share, or RNT, anything else you want to ask about?
Nothing else I want to ask about, Duff, man. I feel like you did a really good job giving everybody a refresher on consent and conversation, but also teaching us new things. So I really appreciate that you're here.
Yeah, likewise. And I will say, Duff, man, one thing we didn't talk about, and I know you and I had chatted offline, but there's also communication after the fact. So aftercare, that's a given, but even sort of debriefing experiences, right? In order to get the next experience even better.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, aftercare is essential with any scene, especially one that can be pretty physically and emotionally draining, because you don't want to leave anybody hanging. You want to make sure that, you're wrapping things up and you're checking on their safety, not just right after you wrap up a scene, but especially if it's somebody that maybe new, or maybe there was a lot that went into the scene that could be physically or emotionally draining. Checking with them, a day after, a couple days after, just doing periodic checkups on, how their frame of mind is, how they feel afterwards. Sometimes they'll come up to you and be like, hey, look at my butt, look at the scars, or they look at the bruises that you left here. I mean, they're amazing. And they'll be really, really happy and excited to go and do something else with you. Sometimes they'll be like, hey, it was a little draining for me. Maybe we should slow down next time. And it's just about having the conversation. But even with any sort of scene, especially with age play in particular, it's such a mentally driven kink, and diapers and passies and clothes and all that stuff, they're just the tools, right? It's the dynamic that is what's important and what should be center focus. So going and having those check-ins, those periodic things with people can expand a scene where you're asking for certain things and, maybe they want to explore more. But just doing those constant check-ins makes things just a better experience for everybody.
Yeah. And that sort of debrief and reflection, both to check on safety. How are you doing? Are we cool? Are you cool? Can I do anything for you? And because next time, if there is a next time, we can make this even more awesome because I have feedback now on what was really meaningful for you, and you have feedback on what was meaningful for me. So communication all over the board, it just makes for great play. Duff, man, thank you so much for being with us again on Love and Brief.
Hey, thank you for having me.
And RNT, you want to take us home by letting people know maybe how they can get in touch with us?
Sure. We are on FetLife, Love and Brief. On FetLife, you can get in contact with Resident Yes. I am never on there, so he is your go-to. You can email us at loveandbrief@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram and on Tumblr. Is that still a thing? At Resident Yes.
Definitely still a thing.
Yes. And that's how you do it.
That's definitely how you do it. We would love your questions. I think I mentioned in our last question roundup, we had finally culled to below 50% of our questions. We were batting over 500 in answering questions. So we've got a summer one coming so we can catch up on that. But would love more of your questions. Always welcome your thoughts and comments. And you can even join the FetLife group. So we have a group on there where we publish every episode and try and really look forward to some commentary on the episodes, positives, negatives, additions, stories we couldn't capture in the episode. So that's on FetLife, just for the Love and Brief podcast group. And Duff, man, if folks want to get a hold of you, how might they do that, or don't they?
So I'm on Instagram, so the Duffman_82. And I'm also on FetLife, although I don't check that quite as often. So Instagram's probably the best route, but I'm also on FetLife, Duffman82.
Right on. And friends, so happy to be back with you. This is our summer schedule, so it's not necessarily as regular because everybody's traveling, but cannot wait to see you on another episode of Love in Brief.